That's pretty good. All right. We're going to talk more about that later. But for now, we're going to talk about how you deal with a buyer or a seller who decides that they're going to change their mind and not proceed with a transaction that they have agreed to. Now, interesting that this topic, we've chosen this topic for today because this morning I got a call from one of our agents, and a seller on a property decided to change their mind and not sell, even though the agent had submitted an offer that was well above the price and terms listed on the co-brokerage agreement, on the listing contract, the co-brokerage offering. And ultimately, it will cost our agent about $20,000. It was an expensive property. And the question that the agent had is, do I have any legal recourse in pursuing that commission, even though the seller never signed the purchase agreement that her buyer wrote up, that she wrote up for her buyer? And my answer was, talk to an attorney, which is the same answer that Eric and I will give you when you ask, I have a seller who wants to get out of a contract, or I have a buyer who wants to get out of a contract and can't do it based on inspections or financing or anything else. Our answer is going to be talk to an attorney, because that attorney needs to advise the client what their consequences are, what the potential liability is if they bail out on a contract without cause, without justification. But going back to the agent this morning who called, my answer was this: I'm not a lawyer, but according to Gail Anderson, she could potentially sue as a third-party beneficiary because she brought a ready, willing, and able buyer. She filled out a contract. They signed. The buyer signed it. She submitted it to the listing agent, and then the next morning, the seller decided, "Oh, we've decided not to sell." Well, let's think about that for a moment. The seller signed a contract that offered a commission to a co-brokerage broker, another broker, if they brought a buyer. Didn't they? Of course they did. So as the third party beneficiary to that contract, our agent may have a right to pursue that loss of commission as damages. But it's going to cost money and a lot of time. And if it weren't for it being a $20,000 commission, I wouldn't even suggest she bother with it. But when you get into those kind of numbers, it may be worthwhile. It may be. But that's where talking to an attorney is the thing to do, because you want to find out, how much is this going to cost me to pursue? And what is my potential for winning? What happens if I don't win? And could we end up in mediation or something that would give me a lesser settlement than the full amount? Those are all questions that belong in an attorney's, in front of an attorney. The same holds true with your buyers and sellers. If either party wants to bail out of a contract without cause, in other words, they don't have a bailout option because of the inspections or because of the title work or survey or well and septic inspection, all of those things, if they don't have the option to bail out, then you need to send them to an attorney. You need to say to them, you really need to talk to an attorney to get the attorney's opinion on what the consequences could be, what the potential damages could be to you in the event you don't fulfill your end of the bargain as stated in the purchase agreement. And generally that answer, send them to an attorney, isn't terribly well received by our agents. They know that their buyers or sellers aren't going to want to pay a bunch of money to an attorney, that they didn't expect to have to do that. But by the same token, that's part of our job to educate them that that the contract means something, that their signatures and an agreement mean something, and they are bound to that and could face liability if they change their minds. So, I always recommend that they talk to an attorney. But sometimes in this business, we can actually use our selling skills, if we have them, to take them back to what their original motivation was and remind them of what they started out, where they started out, and to try to discover whether their decision to not move forward is based in fear, or they truly, genuinely have chosen not to sell or not to buy for whatever reasons. So, selling skills are important in this business. Whether some of us may want to not to acknowledge that, but it's true. Some agents perceive themselves as consultants, not salespeople. Okay, even consultants have a process for identifying information, for discovering information and motivations. So let me share with you my objection handling technique. And I see not moving forward in a contract as an objection, it's a roadblock to move forward. And my objection handling technique is 5 steps: cushion, clarify, ask if I would you, explain here's the deal, and close by asking if that helps. Let me walk through it with you for a moment. If somebody calls me and says, hey Don, I've decided that I really don't want to move forward with the contract. My first recommendation is going to be, have you spoken to your attorney about this? I would encourage you to contact an attorney and get the attorney's advice on the potential liability that you may face. If it's simply a matter that they don't want to move forward and they have justification for it, whether it's inspections or title work or any of those things in the contract, then they have every right to terminate the contract according to the terms of the purchase agreement. But if those options aren't on the table, if they are simply walking away because they have cold feet, or because they've already crossed all the other hurdles and had a change of heart, now we've got a different problem. And so I encourage them, first of all, to talk with their attorney and make sure that they understand the legal implications of their actions. But let's go back to my objection handling technique, which is I question it. I ask them, or I say first of all to them, I understand it's a big decision. It's kind of scary sometimes to realize that you're going to be moving, packing, and all of those kind of things. Acknowledging their feelings, acknowledging that you understand that they're at a crossroads, is really important. It validates them. The immediate reaction very often with agents is that they want to fight. They want to become combative. They want to argue the point and say, well, you can't do that. Well, yeah, you're on a contract. That generally doesn't work out well. It generally adds fuel to the fire rather than to take a step back and say, you know, I understand it's a big step and I can appreciate your concern. It's cushioning it. Then I clarify. Help me understand, if you will, why, what is holding you back? Why did you change your mind? What was the basis for you to change your mind? Can you share that with me? Will you share that with me? And very often they'll say, well, you know, we started to think about that property, and this is a seller situation, for example, and we decided that it was really better to hold on to it because we think it's going to be a good investment in the long run. Okay. Follow-up question. Let me ask you, how much or how long will you hold on to it, and what do you hope to gain? If you hold on to it for the next 5 years or 10 years, how much additional appreciation do you think you'll get? And then they have to start thinking about the growth rate that they really anticipate over the next 5 to 10 years and whether or not that's fantasy or reality. Then I come back to the third thing, which is the question I always ask, if I, would you? So now that I understand that you want to hold on to this investment as an investment for the next 5 to 10 years, and you think that it's going to probably add an additional 50% in value. Let's just say that for the moment. Over that course of that time, it's going to add an additional 50% in value. What else could you do with that money or that investment that if it was cash, if it was liquid cash? And I'm trying to get as much information from them so that I can propose, if I could show you that moving forward with today's contract is in fact a better option than holding on to it for 5 to 10 years, would you even think about moving forward with the existing contract? Because what I'm going to present to them, as you will see, is the downside of their decision. For example, I understand you want to hold on to the investment as an investment property. I get that. And you think that it's going to increase in value by another 50% over the next 5 to 10 years, whatever the time frame is. But what happens if the buyer of this property and the agent who's entitled to a commission come forward and say, we're going to settle this in court? Now you have to go out and hire an attorney to defend your position, and ultimately it's possible that you could lose in court and have to pay that agent's commission as well as damages to the buyer. Now, very often, if a buyer in a home purchase contract, their damages can be anything from moving expenses, staying in a hotel until they find another home to purchase. They can rack up costs in the actual purchase of a home. They might have to pay $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 more than they paid for the home that they had come to an agreement on. So all of a sudden, well, they may have 20 or 30 or 40,000 in damages that they can sue a seller for if that seller chooses not to move forward. The same holds true, and I'm going to hold just for a second. The same holds true with on the flip side. If a buyer bails out without justification, a seller may have the same option to pursue a buyer. The difference is, however, that sometimes a buyer doesn't have the financial wherewithal to pay damages if they are sued. There's just, it's like trying to bleed a turnip. Let's see. We have questions. Okay. So, again, going back to the objection handling technique. You clarify, or you question, you clarify. If I could show you without a shadow of a doubt that canceling this contract or not moving forward with this contract it may not be the best choice for you, would you even think about moving forward? And then explain, here are the options, here are the possibilities, and I encourage you to talk with an attorney to make sure that that attorney agrees with me or may not. But whatever the case is, you need to talk to an attorney. It's important. And then finally, after you're done, close. The final step is to close and say, based on what I've shared with you, do you still want to bail out of the contract, or do you think it's a better choice to move forward in the contract? And then wait for the answer. Don't talk. My mother has a saying, he who talks first loses. She was right. In most cases, if you ask a buyer or a seller a question and then remain quiet and wait for an answer, they will reveal themselves. Too often I see agents talking over, continuing to make their case, trying to argue their point. And all that does is it isolates the client and creates a barrier for you to have have communication with them. Now, also share with you that a friend told me a very long time ago, my mentor, that real estate is a drop of logic in a sea of emotion. Our fire truck just went back the other way. I'll say it again. Real estate is a drop of logic in a sea of emotion. Think about that. Every decision that we make in life is based on emotions. That's one perspective out there, and it's not a bad perspective if you start to think about it. And people will say, no, I'm a very logical person, and all the decisions I make in my life are based on logic. The favorite one I get is from engineers who go in and measure a house and every aspect of the house, and they think of this square footage and this and that, and everything is logical to them. But the reality is that it is emotion that drives them to do that. It is the emotion of feeling safe and feeling validated that they're getting a good deal, that the house is a quality house and has accurate information. It's really about their emotions that they go through this logical process. Somebody challenged me on that one time, and I said, well, let me ask you this. Why do you file your income taxes every year? And they said, well, because I have to. Well, why? Because if I don't, I'm going to go to jail. Oh. So it's the fear and emotion of going to jail which causes you to file your taxes. It's very simple. Think of things that you do in your life that are based on emotion when you actually think that they're based on logic. Think about that, because there's a technique that's called future reflective or future projection reflective close. It's too complicated to remember, don't bother it. But it basically takes the seller or the buyer into the future. And, well, let me explain it this way. Let's say that I had a buyer who wanted to bail out on a contract right now that was going to close, let's say, November 30th. And the buyer had fear. They were afraid of, let's say, the economy, the future, what their job security was going to be like, all of those things. Everything they feared may have been based on logic, may have been based on some science or some projections, but bottom line is, it was their fear that was motivating them. They had lost the dream, the emotion of the dream of how they want to live their lives. So, I say to them, I want to share with you something, and I want you to just stay with me for a minute, if that would be okay. And I want to take you into the future just for a moment. You're sitting around a Christmas tree, for example. Smell of pine needles, hot cocoa, it's Christmas morning. There's a pumpkin pie in the oven for dinner later. The kids are all chattering and laughing around the Christmas tree. In your new condominium, the one that you've dreamed of having for many years. And here you are. You're finally here. And it's wonderful and it's warm. It's exactly what you had hoped for. Now I want to take you back to today. Are you happy you moved forward? Or are you unhappy that the dream that you hunted is never going to happen? It's emotional. And it's, frankly, a little hard-nosed. Sometimes selling skills is about helping people remind themselves of what their goal was when they started out. It gets rocky. It gets scary along the way. Things don't go as smoothly as they had hoped. But there is a solution. And this is the one I want to share. Did you know that chocolate releases endorphins? No. You may already know that, because a lot of people find that when they are down in the dumps, feeling a little blue, having chocolate makes them feel better. And guess what? It's based on science. And the science is that chocolate releases endorphins, which are neurotransmitters which interact with the receptors in your brain to affect how you perceive pain, how you perceive fear, loss, depression. All of those things can be affected by chocolate. So, the next time somebody decides that they're not going to go through with the contract and they're scared and they're worried about all sorts of possibilities out there, I recommend that you suggest to them that they take 2 M&Ms and call you in the morning. They may have changed their mind. And with that, I wish you well. I'll see you here next week. Thanks.